Luckily, we know some of these people.
Note taker.
Note taker, note taker, bring me a note taker. All right, folks. Can we start closing the doors in the back there and getting people to sit down?
We still need a note taker.
Thanks, Pete.
You got one?
No, I'm closing the doors. All right. I'd ask her to close the doors, but I don't know how to do that in sign language.
I will close them.
Okay. All right, folks, time to get started. Let's get situated. Welcome to the second session of the TLS working group. We have a Jabber scribe identified, but we still need a note taker. Going once. All we need is the highlights, the hums, and the good stuff. Anybody willing to volunteer? Going once. Going twice. I saw somebody wave, but it wasn't a wave at me. Mike? Excellent, thank you. All right, we owe you one. Appreciate it. All right, this is the note well. It's Wednesday afternoon-ish. You should have seen this by now. Basically, you're going to be at the microphone. It's going to get recorded. You got an IPR. Please disclose it. More information is available. We did the minute taker, Jabber scribe. The blue sheets are currently making their way around. At the microphone, please state your name at the mic. Let's keep it professional at the mic, as well as being succinct at the mic. We're not going to do any of the other update stuff because we already did it. So now we're going to switch over to the other presentation, which is the main show. Well, they're coming and going. So this is a draft that we've been having a little bit of a tussle about for at least the last 4 IETFs. It's not really a good sign when one of the working group chairs is at the front of the room giving the presentation about the draft. It usually means that we're not in a great place, and that's the case here. I feel that it's a little weird that the chairs are doing this, and it kind of opens us up for appeals, but basically that's life, and we're willing to deal with it at this point. Why do I think we're here? My own personal perspective is that like I say, we cross the streams. So we're basically crossing browsers, web PKI, DNSSEC, and Dane all at once. And so everyone gets lively and it gets exciting. A little bit of a mea culpa here. We haven't done the best job in being chairs during this process. I think that we have a laissez-faire attitude about a lot of things sometimes and hope that it would just kind of work out. And it hasn't. So that's why we're here. And so hopefully we're going to try to fix some of that today. We're willing to take some of the blame, but I'm also here to tell you that there's some blame to be laid at your feet as well. So my plan is to provide an annotated outline of the time of events. There's others that you can use to follow because I posted it earlier in the week to hopefully maybe get you up to speed, and that if there's appeals later that it can be used as an appeal input process. Also, because I got the mic, there'll be some teaching moments that I'm going to let go. And again, the ultimate goal is to see if we can figure out what we're going to do with this draft. So, start off with questions, audience participation. If you are here, please raise your hand. All right, nearly 100% participation. Who's reading their email? All right, great. Who knows what Dane is? That's a pretty good size of the audience. That's good. Who knows what DNSSEC is? All right. Woo, look at that. All right. Who? Oh, jeepers, that whole typing thing. All right. Who has read the draft? Okay, that's pretty good. Who's followed the list discussions? All right. We're getting more than I thought. I'm saying a quarter of the people in the room. That's not bad. Who has read the presentation?
Sean, just clarification.
Yes.
Do you want fully? Because the denial of service attack is such that
No. I just followed the list discussion in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, we're like quarter. All right, who's read the presentation? All right, we're like down to 5. So I got a question, is who's planning to implement this draft? All right, so I see like 3-ish hands. Who's planning to deploy the draft? Well, 3-ish hands, okay, all right. So that's good to know. So just kind of started off back way in the day.
Victor says yes to both.
Okay, okay. Way back in the day, we had an initial post like in 2015, right? We did this, I think it was Melinda that sent this draft across, and it was like, great. There was 2 quick threads. The numbers in the parentheses are the amount of messages that were sent. Now, I may be on or off by some because I get a lot more messages about drafts that you maybe don't because they're in the chair. But hey, the best thing was really awesome is we got an agreed use case in like 10 emails, and it was this. The idea was primarily aimed at making DAME practical for HTTPS or last mile considerations on the client and are a significant part of adoption barrier. And the short version is basically, let's think of this as DAME stapling, kind of like OCSP stapling. And that was fairly easy to get to. That's actually a quote where Victor and Melinda basically agreed. It was great. Got a great kumbaya moment. Basically, everything went pretty normal. There's a lot of messages that I didn't include in there, which was me picking the author saying, well, if there's no problem, let's just push this damn thing forward and keep going. So not a lot happened. So all these things they're all hyperlinks. You can click on them and read the threads and the whole 9 yard. I put the @ signs to show you if you want to jump into the Meet Echo presentation to see where the discussion started. So, just to kind of get ready to go. Working group call for adoption, we had about 10 people that sent in stuff. We confirmed basically what we found at the meeting at IETF 95 that was interest in moving the thing forward, and off we went. Just to note, we had no IETF last call comments. During the ISG evaluation process, we ended up getting a discussion going in Eric's thread where Victor noted that there was a downgrade attack. And what this was he's basically claiming, I'll explain the downgrade attack later, that this was a problem. It had been in the draft, and there was some text in there that had identified mitigations for it, but basically now it's kind of done as a showstopper. So the downgrade attack itself is basically, the short answer here is that DAME needs downgrade resistance against PKIX attacks. And that was the stuff that was from the draft. Absent a whitelist, a client misdirected to a server that is fraudulently acquired a public CA issued certificate for the real server's name could be induced to establish a PKIX verified connection to the rogue server that precluded DAME authentication. Okay, I put it in quotes because some people don't think it's a classical downgrade attack, but that's why I did it. So I'm trying to be as fair as possible here to both sides. Sorry? Yes. So at IETF 101, we had a discussion about that particular downgrade attack during the meeting. And what happened was the discuss that Ecker had got cleared. And then the document got approved. So the problem was, right, so hey, the document gets approved, we're all happy. Well, did we really address the issue that was raised during the discuss, and did we do it properly? So, not surprisingly, right here, we had off-list threats of appeal, at least 2 that I was aware of. And so to kind of address that, we decided to do a consensus to publish as is, or to address the working group issues. And this was the consensus call itself. I don't want to read this all, but basically it's like, do you just want to publish? But if we're not going to publish, do you want to start adding some text about denial of existence and pinning stuff, and then a bunch of other things that happened later? So if no, then what are we going to work on? So this is where the teaching moment starts. So we had 20 people participating in the thread. We had about 10 people actually answer the first question, which was nice. We had 10 people answer some vague amounts of questions. Not always the first question, and some other question that they wanted to. And we had other people that didn't have anything to really say about the thread and just wanted to argue. When the chairs ask these things, it's much better when you actually answer them because it helps us judge consensus. And so the interesting point here is if we were just straight up counting, this document would have been published, right? It was a split decision, but we as the chairs decided basically that there was enough consensus to do A. and there was enough discussion to bring it back to the working group. Now, that didn't happen immediately for whatever reason, but that's basically what we decided. So just to be clear, A was essentially to put some adding denial of existence proofs in the chain provided by the extension. All right. Well, that's the big but here. But we screwed up and didn't tell the author, just put the text in. Now there's a reason for that though, and we'll get onto that in a second. As a minor aside, here's the message count, before and after. This is just to kind of illuminate the amount of threads that happened. And these are the public ones. These are not the private ones. So there's been some threads. So it's not like it's a little different in that if you were at the quick session, you saw that there were lots of people talking about it. There were like 29 people, I think, total or something in these threads, and this is like the top 10. So text proposals. We had a lot. We had some from Victor. We had some from Schumann. We had some from Ben. And then Victor kind of pulled a bunch of them together and did proposals for the interim, which was great. There was some proposals that were, I guess I would consider close to consensus, and some that were a little bit extra. But that's life. All right, hold on, where am I here? All right. Oh, and then we even had an interim about this, just about this. The interesting thing, though, was that we had office proposals, and then after the interim, we tried to have chairs put together some summary of the minutes and what the actual facts on the grounds were, and we had like 100 emails and couldn't agree to it, and we just had to send with what we thought we had. So that really wasn't fun, and it really kind of wasn't great, and we're really not making the IETF great again there. So that's kind of where we are now. And you're here, so there's the whole timeline if you want to see it presented, the whole shoot match. Now for some housekeeping, right? Oh shit, is that not the right version? Can you upload the latest one?
Yeah, hold on. Actually, yeah.
Where's the latest one?
Yeah, this is like, oops. In any event, what we are going to do is provide some actual direction to the authors, the ones that are here I've talked to already. And basically what we're going to start working through is the 24-part commit and what parts to get merged. And I apologize for this.
So while you're not using the microphone, can I just use it for a few seconds about feedback on what you've said so far?
Yes.
Okay, great. You're missing one entry. Do we actually had a side meeting as well at the previous IETF?
Yes, we did.
Before the interim?
Yeah.
Where some people thought a lot of things were agreed and then it all vanished in smoke again. But a more generic point here. By the way, sorry, I'm Paul Wouters. How you list the graphics of the participants and how many emails they sent comes really close to shaming people for sending email. And I really sort of object to that sort of trend where you say like, well, these people are either too aggressive or mail too much. I understand that when some people mail and they send large emails because they're extremely pedantic, that these emails are large and it's sort of, some people don't have the resources to read it, but this comes really close to sort of shaming people from contributing to the IETF.
That was not my intent. I did actually run these slides by other people, and I did think about putting like author and participant and all that kind of stuff. I just put them up there. It's not to shame people. It's just to show that there are some active participants. Is it up? It should reload because I have them. I can get them off.
He's getting them.
This is not the network is not as fast.
Change the 0 to a 1. So isn't that you're up?
Thanks. All right, keep going, keep going. All right, dun, 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 dun. So now some housekeeping. All right, so next. I have the clicker, I can do that. So we had a consensus call during the security considerations thread. The 4 questions that were asked was, do you support the working group taking on future work of pinning mechanisms? Do you support reserved bytes in the revision of future pinning mechanisms? Do you support the proof of denial existence text in the revision? Do you support new and improved security considerations? Obviously, the 2 on the right, or the number 3 was basically kind of redoing one of the first ones. And the number 4 was text that we thought people seemed to be basically pretty happy with, and 1 and 2 were, we think, pretty much where the big argument was. So we had 7 people in that thread. Not great. We're basically at the point where we're finding it difficult to judge that there's consensus to progress the document, especially when it's split like it is. So what happened? Basically, we had yes, we do support the proof of denial existence text in the revisions, and yes, the new and improved security considerations. And we did not have support for pinning or for the reserved bytes. So with that, what we're going to do, I've started this process already, is to merge. There's a 24-part commit in there that's a little bit interesting to follow, but basically Willem has started working on this stuff. There were a bunch that were marked as editorial, and he's going to go through there, and the ones that are editorial, we're just going to merge. The DOE related stuff, we've reconfirmed that we're going to do that, so we're going to push that text in there. We're going to let them identify which ones are DOE related, because there's some that do more than one thing. They're going to merge that text. And then same with the security considerations text, and try to figure out how to do that. And then they're going to publish a new version. But what after that? We've been circling around for this for a while. We are getting less and less participants. A lot of people have, told me off list, so you can take it for what it's worth, that they feel like the thing's been, some of the threads have been hijacked. Some of people have thrown their hands up and walked away. Some said that while they would participate, they don't have time, all kinds of other things. So we're kind of at this point where we can do a couple of things. Since we don't have consensus to put the pinning in or the extension stuff in, we can basically publish a consensus document that we have now without the pinning of the reserve fields. And obviously we'd have to make sure the text all makes sense from the points that will merge, or we can just basically have it gradually die because the people think that the consensus document is just useless. So we're basically trying to figure out what to do here. And we're hoping to have a hum on these 2 options. I think I heard Victor in the queue.
Yes. Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, so the first thing I want to mention is that the call to say that there is no consensus and there cannot be a consensus seems very premature because the landscape has been shifting recently. We have recently clarified the lack of the foot gun. We've had a few people acknowledge that analysis. Chris Wood posted a message summarizing the analysis, asking for substantive responses and objections. Nobody posted anything that in any way refuted the analysis that demonstrated that the pinning is quite different from the analogies to HPKP that were being posted. At this point, there are very few people claiming that the pinning has anything bad, and they've posted nothing of substance to back it up. And so I think that with a little bit more work, the pinning can get support and will go through. And you're shutting down the argument halfway through. And at this point, I see no basis for failure to properly analyze and understand the issue in the past to be a predictor of the future, because the process has recently, in fact, gotten unwedged and is moving forward. And I strongly object to what's happening here. This is an ambush. The slides got published late. Were not available for on-list discussion before this meeting. And I'm sorry, this is not a good way to resolve the issue.
So the last part of the slides were not, as I was still talking with the editors to make sure that they were going to make changes. The first part were posted on Sunday.
Ben Kadek, as responsible AD, I just have to point out that apathy does not represent consensus.
Yes, there has been some text on the list. Yes, there has not been people objecting to it, but we need active agreement in order to declare consensus.
Paul Wouters, I'm a little confused about the term consensus document there, because
so that's
if there was consensus, it was an RFC. Is it clearly not consensus on that?
So yes. So, okay. So it's the idea is that after the consensus changes, that we have changes that we have consensus to make, we would merge those. Then that would be the consensus document of this working group that would be progressed forward to the ISG.
Okay. So then, and this is a remark I've made repeatedly on the list as well. If you're publishing a security extension with a downgraded tag, where the downgrade is between quotes or not, that is not something that should be possible by saying there's consensus to do this downgradable thing. I don't think consensus overrides a security concern.
Paul.
That was Paul Wouters. Ben Kadek interjecting again as responsible AD. There are an awful lot of things that you can publish and we can feel unhappy about it, but if you publish them and you document the security considerations and their reasonable uses even within those security considerations, it is still valid to publish. Yes, it may not be generally applicable, but if there's an application that people are willing to use and we correctly document the actual protocol behavior, it is valid to publish.
If I can just interject briefly. And as a concrete example of that, I'm Richard Barnes. So we've had some discussion, thanks to Tobias Fiebig, about issues with IP use after free that affect ACME. We are continuing to progress ACME despite the presence of that security risk.
All right. Oh, are you still up?
Sorry.
I'm waiting.
Okay. So sorry, Paul Wouters. I'm really confused because for the generic use case as you describe it on the second page of your presentation, that the description that everybody agreed on, that says being able to use Dane in a browser for authentication. This document in its current shape basically says you can use Dane for authentication, and this extension will prove that you're not under attack only when you're not under attack.
Well, I guess I should have asked that question as well. Are there any browsers that are willing to get to the microphone to say that they're planning to implement this?
You can ask that later on, but
yeah.
I'm thinking that Nico was probably in line before I was, so let's give him a chance.
Nico, go ahead.
Am I on?
Yes.
Cool. Sorry, I didn't have an indication. So, right. I think, Victor says we were making progress on the foot gun thing. I think a lot of what was going on here is that a lot of people didn't want to even engage with the proposal because, this fear of foot gun, because, hey, HPKP failed. And in fact, there has been no desire to even engage with the arguments on foot gun, not being a foot gun. This is what Ben refers to as apathy. Of course, you could easily call consensus, right? You could ask for, is there a foot gun? You could actually ask that question. And that would further progress towards consensus. But we don't see this. Instead, we're saying, hey, we're all completely out of patience, too many emails and so on. And, there have been a lot of emails, but nothing like the JSON spec or any number of others. So I'm a little confused. It seems like you're just ramming this through. I think you could totally ask, is there a foot gun? Right? Since that's the only real objection. If there isn't one, then what's the real objection? Are there any others? And I think you're just cutting it short. You're just saying we're enough. I understand the desire for that, but I don't think I don't think we've actually gone through the process correctly or all the way. You have the mic.
Okay, this is Javne, just channeling Victor Duchovny. Would like to remind us that TLS is not just for browsers.
That is true. However, the point is about the use case.
I think I'm in line ahead of Victor. Is this right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Martin Thompson here. I have no plans to implement this. That is from the browser side of things. And when presented with the wall of text that came out, and I apparently only saw a small fraction of the number of emails that have been exchanged on this topic. When you're not planning to implement something, investing the amount of time necessary to follow the thread and participate in the thread becomes a bit of a losing proposition. So from my perspective, the reason that you're getting fewer people involved in this is because they're not interested in the feature and are unwilling to deal with the volume of email that we've had on the topic. And notice I've been waiting in line for quite a while now. I don't see that stopping, unfortunately, and it's kind of toxic, I'm afraid.
Paul Hoffman, I want to emphasize what Martin just said at the end. Because the conversation was toxic, it's not that I'm apathetic. I just didn't want to participate. In fact, I had a couple people on both sides trying to get me involved. And I would say it's not apathy that you're seeing. It's sort of message sickness. But it's also a lack of leadership, quite frankly.
Well, we're taking it on the chin. That's why I'm doing this.
Well, but taking it on the chin by saying that the group has been apathetic is not actually a way to do it. I think calling things again like you're doing now, if you had done that on the list weeks or months ago, would have caused numbers to go up. So I'm hoping that you're going to do that again. And okay, so I won't go on that, but I had a question. At the end of what you said here, you said when it goes back to the IESG.
Well, it's back in the working group. The assumption is if we could actually get another working group last call that showed
it will go through the. I mean, because remember, you pulled this out of Auth 48.
Yes. So it wasn't Auth 48. It was just in the RC editors too. So it is back in the working group.
Okay, so it is officially back in the working group. I will admit that even though I've been sort of trying to follow along, I didn't even catch that. So
okay.
David Skenazy, Google. 2 points. First one, speaking as a browser developer, no plans to implement this. And that goes for both browsers that I've been involved with lately. And second point, as an individual contributor to the working group, I want to echo what the previous people said. The time it would take to invest in this, I don't want to take that time, just the mental stress of just even reading these. So yeah, please, please, please kill this. Let it gracefully die, or if impossible, not gracefully die. This is taking up huge time on the mailing list and in the working group. And if this keeps going on, I'm thinking of maybe I wouldn't attend this session because I am not interested in this. And please kill this so we don't lose contributors that, I don't know about myself, but I'm sure others could provide some interesting feedback to the working group. Please kill this.
Eric Pasquarla, don't need to duplicate Martin's statements about what we will or not implement. I guess in terms of Signal, I certainly agree there have been a number of assertions on the mailing list about what is or is not true. There's been a bunch of back and forth. I'm not sure apathy is the right word, but exhaustion might be. You should not conclude from the fact that I at least have stopped responding on the mailing list that I agree with the claims that have been made by several people.
I believe Victor was next, Rich.
Fine by me.
Hi again. So here we are, and yet the document, even with the 24 commits, still has major gaps that I had postponed talking about until it was clear that we were going somewhere, and I wasn't just going to write commits that nobody was going to read. It fails to properly explain how virtual hosting works, and there are some subtle issues there that need to be clarified. It fails to deal with the DNS TTLs and how the server is supposed to handle them, and that text isn't written. The document still needs considerable work, and we're merely asking for a fucking 2-byte field, pardon my French, that will not in any way be onerous to any implementers, is well motivated, and has seen no substantive to their content. Nobody has explained why these things are bad, why they're incomplete. All we hear is reaction to these things, are bad. There's no substance to why they're bad.
So nothing has stopped you from publishing a draft that included all these things that you wanted. The second thing is, just because there's absence of discussion of a proposal does not make it good. We had this exact problem with Dan Harkin's Dragonfly draft, right? He really, really wanted that thing, and there was just kind of like no interest in moving it forward. There are more than one person here that's interested in doing this, but there does not seem to be many more.
My turn? Okay, Rich Sauls, Akamai. Yeah, I kind of tuned in and then got back involved because looking at the recent posts on some of these threads, the claims and the way it was sold isn't any longer accurate. Victor has posted that, it can be, thanks. Victor has posted, it can be used to strengthen the web PKI by adding in, various other authentication schemes. Paul has posted that it can be used to limit the web PKI because browsers, there's too many unrestricted CAs in the trust store. And so it's not just, we'll add Dane as a strengthening thing. It's now become a completely separate security model, or possible to implement a completely separate security model. So if we're going to reset, because I think there's some active people here who are just going to keep fighting, let's go all the way back to the beginning, because the use case isn't accurate according to the proponents of the draft with or without the 2 bytes.
Wes Herdeker, ISI. Speaking with one of my hats on, I am the IETF guides, one of the co-chairs to introduce new people into the IETF. And one of the things that we have found after listening to a year's worth of feedback is that highly negative discussions cause people to drop out. And when you need the consensus of the IETF, you need the consensus of the participants, this downward slope in participation in discussions is far too common and I am equally as guilty, right? Those of us in the security field, we take a hard line in the stance and we don't want to move. And we're willing to state so loudly. But the problem is when you word messages that don't take the high road in how you deliver your opinion, it pushes people away. And very generically, of the feedback we've received in the past year, 90% of the negative perceptions come from this working group. And it's a problem. And I'm just saying, so think about it as you're writing your messages going forward. Please think about, am I putting this in a derogatory way, or can I encourage other participants by rewording it in a polite way that still gets my technical point across? Okay. Now back to the matter at hand. I'm concerned with option A because publishing the consensus document without the agreed upon text means that technically the document hasn't reached consensus. So missing one piece of the document where maybe there's not agreement upon it loses the notion that the people that disagree about the section will be happy with the consensus document, when the reality is the reason that it was needed was to get consensus around the problem in the first place. So by dropping it, you're still not in consensus to publish the whole document.
It's rough. And the idea would be that we'd obviously have to get the document and put it out there and then do an actual working group last call to determine that that was actually rough, or whatever kind of consensus we would apply to it.
Eric Kinnear from Apple. I'd just like to confirm that we have no plans to implement this.
So, Paul Wouters. In response to Rich on the usage cases, so the TLSA records in DNS already define these use cases. So this working group cannot go ahead and say what other use cases are involved. These use cases with the TLSA traffic, so the usage selectors are clearly defined. Like you can do pinning to restrict the CA, you can do pinning to restrict the end certificate, you can do pinning to restrict to the public key. Those are all defined in RFCs that are out there, and there's DNS clients that use this information. Postfix will use this information. That is all out and deployed and everything. And we're now just looking at how can we also get this security for those clients that cannot reach the last mile to get these records via the normal DNS channel. So we're not talking about introducing new authentication mechanisms or new PKIs. All of these things are already out there and exist. And then my second point is, I'm a little confused that the people who don't like pinning seem to be also the people that have no interest in implementing it anyway. So why not let the pinning go on for those people who do want it and do want to implement it? You don't have to implement this RFC if you don't want to. But why are the people that are not planning to implement it blocking me from my use case?
Wow, I couldn't have picked a better segue. Outstanding. Because I have a proposal to get out of this mess, which is the following. Erica Scorla. In draft RFC, what is the number, Paul, Sean, the IANA considerations for TLS?
8447.
Right. In RFC 8447, we allow you to get all the code points you need based purely on the specification. And so what I propose, and you're right, we don't have any intent to implement this, and I have no objection to that code point being allocated. What I do object to is the document being published the way it's proposed with the endorsement of the TLS working group. Therefore, what I propose is we take this other TLS working group. You should feel free to take this ID and on that basis apply for a code point. And with any semantics you like whatsoever, pinning, no pinning, extension bytes, no extension bytes, any semantics whatsoever, and then we will simply be done.
Richard Barnes, I'll key off the last two words there, let us be done. I think Mr. Skenazy and Mr. Hardacre summarized this pretty well. Now is the moment on which to call closure on this debate and to move on one way or the other. I think there's sort of three paths. I had two paths in mind that the chairs articulated well, but I think Ecker's articulated a valid third path. You know, if there is some, if we can roll back to some things we agree on and implement those things and get people to a point where they're willing to go forward with publishing, by all means, let's do that and succeed if we can succeed. But if that's not possible, then I think it's now this is the time to take this back, to take it out of the working group's queue, and the authors can start over either with this document or with Ecker's approach if they like.
Yeah, and to be clear, like gracefully die in the working group, there's always the possibility for someone to write whatever draft they want, to have it be there, just be an internet draft and request code points. They could go to the ISC, they could take it to the area director, they could, there's lots of ways for these things to get published. We're not talking about stopping that publishing. It's just that we don't have consensus here to do it.
Right, but whether this goes out the productive end of the working group pipeline or back out the back end, it's time to get out of the pipeline.
Hi, channeling Tariq Saraj from the job room. I would counter comment over what that guy from Google said. I guess that's David. That let the document die gracefully or ungracefully. I'm sorry, it is still a contribution, and it proved that this kind of implementation doesn't have the community consensus, and let's kill it gracefully. Please highlight my comment. Thanks.
Hi, Steve Barr. I guess I'm just going to agree with the last couple of people. I don't see how you can kind of get to a working group consensus document with the pinning and reserve stuff. I think that's kind of a pity, but I think that's reality. So maybe, you know, taking it to the ISE with getting code points is kind of reasonable.
I don't even need to do that. I mean, technically,
sure.
Technically, they don't need to do that, but if they
want
to
do
that,
yeah. But I mean, I also agree that, you know, I think we should try and draw a line under this and kind of move on.
Victor?
Yes, I have a question with that. I'm curious about, you know, on what basis one can, you know, object to something if one doesn't present, you know, any evidence as to why it's bad, nor doesn't want to implement it. You know, if the people who don't want to do this are the only ones objecting, why does it matter that they object?
Oh, well, I'm happy with this.
There you go. I actually, while I'm here, Lorenzo Colidi, that's my name. Having seen this happen in another working group that ended up spinning at wheels for a very long time on a very toxic document, was then kicked out, and then the working group was rechartered and so on. ISE is really an easy way out for everyone here. The only question is, if I were an author, I'd want to know in advance whether someone would then block my ISE submission on the basis that it was conflicting with the IETF work.
We'll be clear that if they get kicked out of this working group or decide to go out or whatever they do, the first question the ISE asks says, "Have you been to the TLS working group?" They will ask us, and we'll say yes. Here are the hundreds of messages, and here's the one where we said, "You've been set loose. Go forth, be free." We'll make that very clear.
So it seems to me that any participant in this working group can tell the authors of this draft that they will never publish this document in the next 50 years because they will be in this room opposing them.
No,
and
so the ISE, if they go the ISE route, there was no IETF
That's
last
my point.
call, right? Yeah, so there's
That's
no
my-
IETF last call. There will be a 5742 review, and the ADs will look to us and say, "Did you talk about it here?" and let it go.
What I'm saying is that it only takes one person in this room or 2 or 3 people in this room to tell the authors, "I will always oppose your document no matter what you do, and you will never pass." It
How rough consensus works.
isn't it? Isn't it? No? Really? Okay, you live in a nice happy world where you read the documents, you believe them. That's in practice what happens. So, I mean, I know this is not a nice thing to say. Go on in. Yeah.
So we just had a contentious, Kathleen Moriarty. Oh. And I'm on the ISC board. So we just had a contentious document go through the ISC, and the ISE takes the advice of the IESG from conflict review. They don't have to adhere to that advice. They can publish anyway. They are their own publication stream. That advice is very important. It's very helpful, but they have that option.
What I'm saying is actually, from an author's perspective, it is way more likely that this document will ever be published as an ISE than through this working group. And so if you know, I'll roll back my earlier statements in the interest of consensus. Yes, okay, maybe nobody can stop a document forever. But in practice, it's going to be a hell of a lot harder to get it through this working group than out through the ISE, right? And that's something that I'm going to roll back on my earlier comments. I think we should you know, in a spirit of collaboration, recommend to the authors that they go that route because it's going to be a lot better for everyone.
David Skenazy, aka the guy from Google, apparently. I'd like to clarify my earlier points. I was not suggesting, to rebut Paul, in any way to prevent anyone from implementing this, if only because I don't have that power and you do whatever you want, that's fine. I was not suggesting that you don't try to publish this somewhere else either. You can do that. Do whatever you want. All I was saying is this needs to move out of this working group. When I say please kill this, I'm saying please kill this discussion inside the TLS working group. You're most welcome to implement this, to deploy this, to have a draft somewhere else, to go try to publish it somewhere else, just not here.
So just to address the question Victor raised, generally, we do not, in the IETF, assume the only people with status to discuss where documents should be advanced are people who plan to implement. So I hope that's certainly true because I've been participating for years discussing things I don't plan to implement. You know, the question is does the working group have consensus? This is good stuff. And I think that's where this is falling around. I want to clarify, I don't believe there's consensus for either variant of this. So I think it's falling ground on both directions.
Rich Saul-Akamai. Yeah, Victor also understands the importance or the difference between working group and non. OpenSSL has a policy that if it's not a standard document, it's not going to go in unless somebody on the project really, really, really wants it. So it might have been a rhetorical question.
So I think maybe what we're going to try to do is do a little. Sorry, I didn't see him there. Sorry.
First. Nico, go ahead.
Yes. So I have a lot of sympathy for we're really tired of this thing argument. I won't really object to moving forward in any of the ways that were proposed just now effectively. Both drafts to ISC, you know, or one. But if we do one in the working group without pinning, I really, really want the denial of existence stuff in there, right? So the bugs have to be fixed. We can agree to disagree on pinning, but the bugs have to be fixed. Yeah, and you know, I agree that if there's no desire in the working group, I don't want to DOS the working group. So if
yeah,
I see it is, then I see it is.
So Nico, yeah. So to get to that point, I guess what we're going to do is kind of bash the questions on the fly here. One is keep working on it in the working group. One is set it free. Cullen
Jennings. Just listening to this conversation, consensus is measured at Cullen Jennings. Consensus is measured at a point in time. And I think you almost need to ask the original question you asked for any work, which is, does the working group have consensus to work on this? Because that question is obviously open at this point. And it's just one question. It's a very simple question we ask all the time. You could ask it again easily, and I suspect the answer you're going to get to that question means you don't have to debate into more of the finer details here.
Yeah, that's why I was basically going to just try to go for, you know, are we still interested in working on this document? Yes or no? And doing a hum on that.
Nico?
Well, yeah, I agree with that. I just thought maybe I should raise my hand to continue the previous thing. I'll just put it down.
You want to take here? I just want to make sure that we get the actual question up there, because I know that everyone likes to put the words in different places and include commas. So however we can get to the point where we can get to a window that we can type some words, we can wordsmith on the fly.
So while you're doing that, Stan York, just to be clear for folks too who are looking at, you know, saying let's punt this to ISE or something, or let the authors choose that. Just the author or the folks who, I mean, should be aware of that ISE also means it's either informational or experimental. It's not a standard.
Yeah, it was great when I was actually reviewing the minutes or the very first presentation. Phil Baker got up and was like, "Man, you guys should really go experimental." It was kind of interesting. Maybe that would have been a good way to go at the beginning, but who knows?
All right.
So I think what we're looking for.
Lawrence, might I point out that ISE has the nice property that it says right at the top, this is not an IETF standard. And sometimes people get confused when they see RFCs and they think they're standards. And ISE is, I think, the best vehicle that can be produced by the IETF in terms of lessening that confusion.
Yeah, I mean, but again, I think that would be up to the authors of the new version to go where they see fit. So it's going to be a yes or no hum. So please hum now if you are interested in continuing to work on this document in the working group. So that's pretty clear consensus that there's not interest in continuing to work on this. Do the one? Okay. Please hum now if you think that the working group should not work on this draft. That's pretty clear. So I should be clear also that I'm not really happy with this outcome. It would have been a lot better if we could have got this worked on. It's unfortunate that this happens. This is not our shining greatest moment. Hopefully we will have some learning moments, and I'm interested in hearing your opinions on how we could do a better job. That concludes this session. Thank you.
For those who, on a lighter note, sort of, for those who know, no.
Go ahead.
Yeah. For those who know Bob Moskowitz, there's a get well card out by the printed agenda in the second floor. Feel free to sign it. I'm going to mail it to him when I get back home.
Alrighty. Yeah, it does suck, but it's like.
now.